I found peace in 2022. This is the story of what that means, how it happened, and why it matters. To tell it properly, we'll need to begin at the same place it ends. January 1st. If I found peace in 2022, it means that in 2021, I was still searching. But by all accounts, life should have been pretty good. I successfully freed myself from the drudgery of a corporate vocation. My girlfriend did as well and started her own design practice with her two best friends. We moved into a new space, and while still humble, it feels like luxury compared to sharing a small studio apartment in the attic of a house. But perhaps most exciting to me was the advent of a day long coming. I was now free to pursue something I had been largely suppressing for most of my life. The arts. Or at least, so I thought. When I first began to establish a legitimate career making visual media, it felt blue sky. No limits, no rules, just me and whatever was inside that wanted out. How naive. There are plenty of rules, all kinds of limits, and most of what was inside of me ultimately never saw the light of day. It's kind of like thinking a car allows you to travel boundlessly. It just isn't true. You are constrained by the road system, the speed limit, traffic, fuel, and so on. But the difference between a car and a highway, and an artist and their medium, is that for the artist, much of those limits are self-imposed. It took me too long to realize that the door was locked from the inside. And so for much of the 2020s, I felt at odds with the work I was creating. I questioned whether what I saw on the screen was truly representative of who I was, especially when I began to be labeled a finance guy. The problem with being labeled is that it puts you in a box. You begin to adopt that identity, especially when your livelihood depends on it. Have you ever heard the story about the baboon and the salt trap?
It's so much bigger than money, though, Dave. It's so much bigger than money.
Oh, no, it was bigger than money. But you know what? I watched one of these nature shows one time, and they were talking about how a bushman finds water when it's scarce. And they do what's called a salt trap. I didn't know this. Apparently, baboons love salt.
Okay.
So they put a lump of salt in a hole, and they wait for the baboon. The baboon comes, sticks his hand in the hole, grabs the salt makes his hand bigger, and he's trapped. He can't get his hand out. Now, if he's smart, all he does is let go of the salt. Baboon doesn't want to let go of the salt. Then the bushman just comes, takes the baboon, throws him in the cage, and gives him all the salt he wants. And then the baboon gets thirsty. The bushman lets him out the cage. The first place the baboon runs to is water. The bushman follows him, and they both drink to their fill. And in that analogy, I felt like the baboon. But I was smart enough to let go of the salt.
Well, last year, like Dave did when he left the Chappelle Show, I decided to let go of the salt, too. It was on this shore that I relinquished it all, including my goal to reach early retirement, a central tenet of the financial independence movement, and something which had come to make up a large part of the story I told myself about myself. In this newly formed void, I planted a new goal. Something personal, something just for me, that I dare not speak aloud. And as the summer reluctantly began to wane, I felt light as I threw on my backpack and headed overseas for some time. It was here that I would begin to take the first inching steps towards returning home. Not my physical home, that was thousands of miles away, and I was not due to go back anytime soon. I was beginning the process of returning to my own sense of self, without fear, without labels, and without constraints. And what a wonderful thing it was. Where I used to fear trespassing the bounds of an imaginary prison, I found myself traipsing through adventurous lands, questions in hand, and the promise of an answer just up ahead. It turns out the blue sky isn't out there in a career choice or life path, but rather always within us if we're willing to look past the clouds. For I would submit, the greater fear is not to have shown your heart and failed, but to have concealed it and won. And so, in peace, I said my goodbyes to the sea breeze, the snow-lined peaks, and the moonlit canals. It was time to return home, to greet the leaves one last time before they bid their own farewells for the season. As I set out one morning for my first walk since returning home, I kept thinking of something my great-grandmother said to me the year prior. I asked her, if you were raising a child today, what would be the main thing you would want for them? Her response was,
well, I'd certainly want them to do something that would be pleasing to them and not worry about trying to please someone else.
This response to me was unexpected. She had lived for 100 years after all. Surely there was something more important. But then I realized what she was really saying was to live a life in accordance with your deepest self. To be the hand that holds the pen which writes your story, not your employer, your family, or other usurpers. Or, more simply put, to be yourself. Because after 100 years of life, now staring into the eyes of impermanence, what could provide more calm, more poise, and more peace? One morning, I awoke to a late autumn snow that blanketed the forest. It was a beautiful, brief, and unexpected sight. Looking out, I was reminded that no matter how much we model, infer, or extrapolate, our knowledge of a subject and our predictions upon it will always be imperfect. Moreover, the continuous pursuit of knowledge seems to only reveal one thing. The more I learn, the less I know. These days, I have more questions than I have answers. And for this reason, I no longer feel comfortable taking the role of the teacher, if I ever did. Instead, I feel much more at home with boots on my feet, a book in my bag, and a curiosity on my mind. So, here's to a year of new adventures. Here's to letting go of the salt. And here's to, as a friend of mine would say, leaning into ourselves, or for the more daring among us, just jump.